My name is Joseph Lloyd and I'm an independent vehicle consultant. I find cars for people. Over the past year on my YouTube channel, I've done a series of about 25 reviews known as the Tweed Jacket reviews, where I've reviewed and assessed cars of all different shapes and sizes, old and new, expensive and cheap. I've had some feedback though from some of my viewers who obviously love the reviews but want something a little bit less expensive. And so I present to you no budget reviews, all filmed on a phone, no fancy editing, no fluid head tripods, no DSLRs, just honest cars for less than £1,000 that you can pick up on the second-hand market. So join me on an adventure around the country as we go and find these cars for less than £1,000, and we have a lot of fun doing so. Good morning. I'm here in Crawley Down in West Sussex with Mr. Richardson, who is doing some filming with my SsangYong Tivoli. You'll see that Tweed Jacket review at some point in the future. But today is no budget reviews, and so we don't have the fancy stuff that he has. We don't have separate microphones and fluid head tripods and things like that. But we do have this lovely Mini. This is a pilot build Mini Cooper from 2001. You can tell this is a pilot build car because it's on a Y plate, and normal customer cars didn't actually start being registered until September 2001 on a 51 plate. There's various little differences between this and a full production car, such as these little plastic bits in the scuttle. They were only produced in 4 colours of the pilot build cars, which were blue and black for the Mini 1s and silver and red for the Coopers. This has the Tritec engine in it, 1.6, developing 115 horsepower. For some reason in the mid-1990s, BMW, who owned Rover at the time, decided that they would not use the K-Series engine in this car and instead develop a brand new engine made in Brazil and co-developed the engine with Chrysler. So a version of this engine actually went into the Chrysler PT Cruiser, and then Fiat bought the design a few years later, and actually that was used in the Tipo called the E-Torque engine. So really quite a bizarre hybrid of an engine. But this particular car, designed by the legendary Frank Stevenson, who also designed the Fiat 500 for 2007. I've always thought these are very nicely proportioned cars. I know the Isugonis original to me looks even better than this, but for a car designed in the early 2000s, when you had things like the PT Cruiser and the Beetle, which I've never liked as much as the Minis. I think the Beetle's okay, PT Cruiser, let's not go there, but the design of the car is very nice. Up until the sort of late 2000s, you couldn't get a 5-door Mini at all. They were only available as a 3-door. This was the original thing, now called the Mini Hatch. I think it was just called the Mini at the time. The pilot build Coopers that were red were all in this colour scheme, with a white roof, white mirror caps and white alloy wheels. Let's open up the door with this lovely chrome handle and take a look at this interior. It looks quite restrained to my eyes anyway, looking at modern Minis. But this would have been quite something at the time. The grab handle here reminds me of that sort of cable operated thing that the early Mark I Minis had. To open the door, you sort of pulled a cable inside it, which was you know, quite something. And then this little interior door handle, that looks very much like the ones they still use today. So if we get in here, it's very obvious where the inspiration for this car comes from. The last Mini I was in Cape Town in 2011, and that was a locally built one from '76, in this colour actually, a red one. And they didn't call them Clubmans there, but they put the Clubman front on all of them. And this kind of little windscreen, very different from the cars of the early 2000s really, at this quite steep angle It feels to me like a bit like driving in a postbox, but then again, so does original Mini, so nothing different there. Then all these unique little bits of design on the dashboard, the mirror switches with these kind of toggles here. So electric window switches, mirror switches there. Electric window switches and, you know, DSC and door locking buttons and fog light buttons, all arranged in this row. Obviously, to stop your knees getting impaled on them in an accident, they've put these bits here, which is very clever. Very simple to operate heater controls, air conditioning in this particular car. The stereo is being sent away for repair quite soon. It's just here as a placeholder in the dash, so we're not going to use that today. Nice little sort of eyeball vents as well. An original Mini from the 60s, 70s would have had two of these on the outer bits of the dashboard, and so it is here. Rev Counter I don't think was standard on all models. Certainly on the Cooper I think you definitely need one, but maybe on the one you don't. Cigarette lighter is kind of there, and then he's got these cup holders. Nice conventional handbrake. I'm not sure what that is down there. Something to do with tyre inflation maybe. But yes, a very nice custom-made interior. I don't think there's no glove box. It's just a shelf, just like it would have been original Mini. Sorry about the light there. Yeah, you know, I quite like it. I didn't like these cars at the time. I thought they were just completely ridiculous and overstyled, and I would have just said to someone to buy a Polo. But I don't think that's really the point of these, is it? Anyway, let's see if we can get in the back and use the passenger side to do that. Right, let's be very careful with this, because these little releases for getting in the back are actually a weak point on these cars. You know, I'm not even sure I can get it here. There's no space in here or anything. I'm just, yeah, we'll just film from this angle. I'm not going to try to get in the back, because I don't think I'll be able to. I've been in the back of one of these before actually, and there really is not a lot of room. I don't know if there's more room on the Isagonis Mini than there is in these. But yeah, there we go. Apologies for the wind noise, by the way. Only two seats, of course, in something like this. Really, the original Mini was only a two-seater in the back at best, but just space efficiency is better than on this car. It wasn't designed as a car for base transportation, although people within the Rover group, when they were designing this, wanted a bit more basic car than they got. BMW were quite keen to push it up market, which, for the survival of the brand, probably was actually quite a good idea. Because we're still, you know, having new Minis today, and they seem to be one of the best-selling cars in Britain. So, yeah, let's pop that back with the lever. Hold on a second, viewers. Right, we've got that back. Take you round to the boot. Normal handle in there. See, we can have a look at the beer can exhaust, which was actually based on a beer can, because Frank Stevenson hadn't designed the exhaust tip, and he used a beer can to actually finish the design off. Not a huge boot in here, probably about 150 litres. There's no spare wheel in here, it's just sort of bits and pieces you need, tyre inflation kit, that kind of stuff. But again, this wasn't a car that was designed for people who needed practicality. It was all about the driving experience and the looks of it. These cars start these days from about £500, so you know, you're getting something which actually was quite expensive when it was new for the class of the car. But people love them. Madonna had one of these, of course, as well. So, yes, interesting. Tritec engine, conventional four-cylinder design. I still don't really know why BMW went into this joint venture with Rover and Chrysler to develop a new engine. I just presume they didn't like the K series and were fed up of paying warranty claims on it, so they decided to build a new engine. But here it is. The bonnet is very interesting on these R50 and R53 Minis, because the whole thing lifts up. It's sort of like a Triumph Herald in reverse, because the lights go up with the bonnet. And if you just had a normal bonnet of about this sort of size, the engine access would have been terrible. I know the engine access on an original Mini is bad, but this probably would have been worse. The dipsticks do break off the top of them, but you can still get those from the main dealer actually, so it's not too bad. There should be some foam inside these grills on the scuttle panel here, but that tends to break off as well, and disintegrate, so they're just left naked in this car. The strut tops, some of the paint is disintegrated on them after some sort of failed attempt to clean them, but they're not sort of holder or anything. And actually the access isn't too bad. Looks reasonably straightforward to service under here. And of course getting to the headlamp units is quite easy as well, because they're just in these little pods up here. Yes, so 115 horsepower in this particular car, but this engine had about 4 different power outputs depending on the model. So it depends on what you want really. Right viewers, let's put this R65 gearbox into the right position and off we go. Yes, if you're lucky you might see me waving at myself, but Mr. Richardson has just taken some video of me heading off. One of the funny things I've noticed immediately is that the indicator light is like the old Minis were. It's not directional, so it's, if you go left or right, you actually see the button just flashing generally. So the engine's available in the R50 Mini, which is what the Minis from 2001 to 2004 were called, were a 1.4 in the Mini 1, and that was only available in markets like, I think, Greece and Portugal for tax reasons. Then the 1.6 Mini 1 was 95 horsepower with a 1.6 engine. This one is the Cooper, so it has 115 brake horsepower engine. Gosh, this enormous speedometer is probably the biggest I've ever seen in any car. Wow, it's all off-centre down there. Later models of Mini, you had a digital speedo here, but this one, of course, is just the big round one, a bit like on the original cars from the 60s. Then we have the Cooper S turbocharged car, same Tritec engine, 160 horsepower, later 170 horsepower. After that, there was the John Cooper Works edition that had 215 horsepower, which, you know, I can tell the chassis in this car can take it. We haven't got quite as much bounce as we would have had on the original rubber cone suspension in the Mini, but it's quite a firm ride, which is absolutely fine. You know, this is a car that was designed for handling, and it does have very nice steering. I think it's hydraulic in this particular car, and you can really point it where it wants to go really, really easily. It does have that sort of quality that they've engineered into the chassis. It's not the most characterful engine, though, I must admit. I'm sure if you had a Cooper S supercharger, then that would be better. But the driving position is absolutely excellent. It is very comfortable, and also we're down on the floor like we'd be in the original Mini, and it feels really, really good. Very impressed, really. I don't know whether or not I expected to like this car. It's not really my kind of thing. A lot of them were driven by estate agents and people like that when the car was new, but now with very accessible second-hand prices on these cars, it's very much something that is now a classic. And you know, I completely understand why you'd want one of these. The trim levels available were pretty much just like the engine choices. There was the one, there was the Cooper S, and the Cooper S John Cooper Works edition. There are also some option packs: salt, pepper and chili. This car has the chili pack, and it was sent to a dealer in Yorkshire, I think in July 2001, for evaluation purposes and for training and things like that. Well, we'll go and find some little corners and things, and we'll enjoy ourselves a bit more. Gearbox in this car is an R65 gearbox. Originally these gearboxes were developed for use in Rover Group cars. It was a sort of Peugeot Rover joint development, and they were in cars like the Rover Metro, the Rover 400, and they were built in a BMW factory. The issue with them was that when MG Rover wanted to continue using them in 2000, when the company was formed, BMW actually retained the factory to make the gearboxes for themselves. So what you found was that they eventually abandoned the idea because BMW were charging too much for the gearboxes, and they got Ford to make the gearboxes for them instead. So most of the Rover 25s and MG ZRs and Rover 45s and MG ZSs, they had a Ford IB5 gearbox after 2003, up to 1.6 litre petrols. This car, of course, still has the R65, and these were used from 2001 until 2004 with the R53 facelift. After that they went to a Gearbox unit. Other gearbox options available were a CVT unit for an automatic transmission, which was used in the sort of one in the Cooper. That was supplied by ZF. I imagine that was a similar unit to the one used in cars like the MGF and Rover 45. And then there was the Cooper S, which had a completely different choice of gearboxes. Rather than a 5-speed manual, that had a 6-speed manual, and also an automatic gearbox that was supplied by ASIN. Certainly there does feel like there's enough power in this car, and I apologise for the mount being in the way. This is of course no budget reviews, so that's sort of just what happens really. Yeah, a little firm, rider's a little firm, a little bit crashy, but this car has done 132,000 miles, so it's done pretty well. This driver's seat's been changed for a driver's seat from another pilot built car. This is pilot built car number 202. The seat was taken from pilot built car number 204. One thing I love about no budget reviews is discovering cars which you can buy for under £1,000 in reasonable condition with an MOT, but are an absolute joy to drive. The MG ZT that you would have seen on the channel earlier this week, that was really nice to drive, and again it's from a similar era to this car, and this is really nice. I think the space efficiency of the car, to be honest, is very good, but it is just very, very comfortable. It's very sharp in terms of the handling, and the engine is better than I was expecting. It's not the most characterful engine I've ever driven, and I think some people have even put K-series engines in these, but you can tune them to some quite considerable power outputs thanks to the work that people did with the Cooper S and showed that that was possible. Obviously the engine suffered from oil leaks. I think some of these had fires. There was a watchdog report on the fires that were actually sometimes occurring with these cars. Another issue is the handles which break off from the seats to move them forward and back, and various other little build quality niggles on these. But from the standpoint of a car at the time, and also they were talking about a Rover co-developed car and a BMW co-developed car, and there are numerous faults with BMWs of the era and also Rovers of the era, so you know, probably just to say it's not significantly better or significantly worse than a lot of the cars at the time. Certainly if we're comparing this to Renault Clio of the era, I think this would probably be a little bit better. Oh, what a joy with this steering and this gear shift, which is a lot nicer than I thought it would be. I've driven R65 gearbox cars before and they've been horrible and floppy and nasty. And it's a cable gearbox, so that does sometimes cause problems. But this one feels really good. Right, well, I suppose we'll have to eventually come back and form some kind of conclusion about this car relatively soon. So I will see you back at the little car park and we'll form some conclusions. The R50 Mini isn't a car that I particularly liked when it was new. I thought the sort of people who drove them had more money than sense, and the fact that the practicality of this car is so compromised really didn't appeal it to me at all. However, from the point of view of an everyday classic, and bear in mind how cheap some of these cars now are, then it does make a lot of sense. It doesn't really matter the boot is pretty much useless and the rear seats are even worse. The car drives really, really nicely. It's surprisingly comfortable as well, and it's just a lot of fun. The little details that hark back to historic Minis are quite well executed, really, although it would be nice to have a digital readout on the Rev Counter here, which came in later cars. Obviously there are some things to be aware of when buying one of these, but the car's almost 20 years old now, so you really would expect that. Anyway, thank you for watching this episode of No Budget Reviews. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Please don't forget to like this video, to leave a comment below, and visit my Facebook page, facebook.com/Lloyd Vehicle Consulting, and Instagram too, instagram.com/Lloyd_Vehicle_Consulting. And we'll see you next time for some more No Budget Reviews.